Hello and welcome to Cutting Down the Nets. This is the February 15th, 2021 edition. We are coming off an epic disaster of a day, which, if you've been gambling long enough, you know that it can happen. You try to take some lessons from it. What did we learn? How are we feeling? What was the result? Basically, how did things go yesterday? So, this is how I was feeling basically on life support until the Irish got there late, but ultimately a disaster of a day, which is possible. We went 1-7. Have I had worse days? Absolutely. Have I had better days? Yes, certainly. But when when you fill a card the way I did yesterday, I think this is possible, and this is part of my lessons learned. So the one game that covered was a typical Sunday game. These teams hadn't played in 4 or 5 days. They show up, game takes place, and the result happens. The 7 losses were all back-to-backs. So back-to-backs aren't necessarily new. The Ivy League's been doing them for years where like Yale will play at Columbia on Friday, and then on Saturday Columbia will play at Yale. What these back-to-backs have been are true run it back. Loyola is playing at the Knapp Center at Drake on Saturday, and then they play at the exact same spot the following day. So does that mean my data will not work for those games? No, I don't think so. But I just think from a median projection world that I live in, I don't know if the second leg of a back-to-back in the same arena with the same teams is necessarily good process, and that's something that I'll have to find my way through this final month and make decisions around whether or not to play a high volume of these back-to-backs. I know I'll play some. So overall, we went to 13, 12, and 1. I'm not surprised that we were in the 50s. I am surprised it happened so quickly. But when you come off a day like that, I think it's important to establish some credibility. So I am going to pull up the Action app, which highlights the last game, I bet, which is my alma mater just sticking a fork in me at the end of the day. But the reason I bring this up is if you're new to me or new to this type of betting where you're using adjusted efficiencies, um, don't jump ship. I would highly um, recommend against doing that. So all time NCAA basketball record for me is using a sample size of about 2,200 plus games, and it's at 53.7. That number is actually skewed a little bit because I'll screw around in there with some over/under testing, and I did some underdog money line testing on, if an underdog was close enough, what if we, bet all these underdog money lines? And I do that just because gambling sites in general have awful tracking. I don't think that's a mistake. They don't want you to be able to easily track your results. So I use the Action Network app. I enjoy it, but I think it may help to see that over a large sample size, the results are much, much, much better. So today's a unique slate. There's 10 total games on the schedule. I am choosing to play one game. And since it's such a low volume, I thought it would be helpful to walk through my thought process and not just spit out which game I'm playing. If you want to just jump to the game and not learn anything, go for it. But what I've done is I've pulled up the profiles of the teams that I am going to wager on. I have purposely covered up their opponents and records so that you don't know who this is. So we're looking in the middle of this data set at adjusted offense and adjusted defense. If this is new to you, hop back in and look at the pinned video, the longer video that does a tutorial on how to, what is this data, how do you use it to handicap a game. So this team's profile, this is the road team tonight. Let's start with their adjusted offensive efficiency. You see a team that has proven, with the exception of a 5 game stretch, that it is not very good offensively, very average. And there was that 5 game stretch where things turned around. They have shown in the last 5 that they've kind of regressed back to who they were. So you have to make that decision of, is it still trending up? Is it trending down? And what decision would you make? It looks like they um, fall victim to their 3 point shooting, which is not uncommon. If a team has an amazing adjusted offensive efficiency for a game, they typically shot the ball really well. So, long story short, for this game, this team, I am going to project 100.3 for adjusted offensive efficiency. When we take that times the opponent's defense, that's how we actually come up with their points per possession, which we'll do at the end here. Now, on defense, this is a team that had a few good performances early on. They've had a few good performances late, but I think we're kind of seeing a profile. So, what I've done is I've taken that mid 105, 106 number, and I've landed on defensive efficiency for 107.5. By the way, I do not do this manually for every game. I would not have time to do that. I did build a computer program to do what I ask it to, weight certain things certain ways, and how to treat outliers. So that's game one, or team one, the road team, 100.3 and 107.5. This is the home team tonight. Their offensive profile looks like it has kind of come into its own. There's still a few outliers popping up from time to time, but their baseline projection is still going to be affected by these first 4 games of the season. And I'm discounting basically those first 8. They had a big offensive outlier in there, 5 offensive outliers that were not very strong early on. So I just feel like I kind of have a feel for who they are using more recent data in this example, and I'm assigning a 104.1 adjusted offensive efficiency to this team. Look at their defense. It's pretty consistent. We've had 1 game pop up in the middle there, and other than that, it is a defense that I feel looks fairly consistent and should be easy to project. And the number I landed on was a 95.2. So who are these teams? I am going to lay the 7.5 with the Cougars, who are playing the in-state rival Washington Huskies. So you can see the efficiencies I used. Instead of just spitting it out today, I thought it might be helpful to get a little more of a feel for how I end up on these numbers. And as you look at them, you may say, yeah, I see the same thing, or I'm going to disagree, and I'm going to give Washington more credit for that 5 game stretch of their offense, or I'm not going to give Washington State as much credit for their offense. They're not an efficient offensive team. Whatever you decide. So ultimately, this is where I land today, the only game I am going to play. And I wish you all luck, and we'll see you tomorrow.